Welcome to the live stream, ladies and gentlemen. I am your host today, Bumpy McSquigums. I am joined by a cup of goodness and tiny disaster. I gave her A and took her A away. It's fine. It's all good. Hello. How's
Hey,
everybody today?
Bumpy. Good. How are you doing?
I'm dying slowly, miserably.
Tiny disaster.
All good here.
Not dying slowly, I hear. That's good.
Allergies suck. Anyway, it's fine.
That's right. It's an allergy thing, not just that there's straight death and. But I mean, allergies can feel like that, though.
Yeah.
100%. It actually makes you feel like you're like, I am not a 100% person right now. I have to just be kind of like, barely like just because when it hits you in the face, it's like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a weird thing. It's just like you're just breathing air, and somehow that hurts you.
It's
Makes
agitating.
you feel real weak.
It's agitating, and yet it's like you feel like when you complain about it, you're like, there's so many worse things than allergies. It's just this it is the most major of minor irritations that I'm not sure how else to describe it. Yeah,
Depends on how bad they are, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if you have like I've had allergies where I really felt like my sinuses have tried to attack the inside of my head, and like I'm like, okay, well, I'm gonna have to just curl in a ball here, like for a second. So that is pretty debilitating. But most of the time, it's just like, just the constant. Oh, I sneezed once, so instead of that clearing things out, it's like, nope, we're gonna just go on the cycle of having to sneeze again and again and again and again and again.
Well, the sneezing part sucks. It's the itchy eyes that bother me the most.
Mm-hmm.
I hate it.
And allergies hit people different. Yeah, we're gonna talk about an hour on allergies. Wouldn't be like outlandish, but I understand that's not going to happen right at the moment, so that's okay. We didn't have a plan for today. Indie Bros allergies stream.
I'm either taking birth control pills or allergy medicine, so it should be fine.
I hope it's the allergy medicine because otherwise it's just going to be
cruel. She'd be like, hey, you're never going to get pregnant. I lack certain things, but it's fine.
There are benefits to some birth controls though, so maybe I don't think there's any allergy medicine in them though.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, explains the itchy eyes.
So it's important to take your allergy medicine when you're going outside, when you're going to be mixing it up in social situations. Do you see the segue here? When you're going to potentially a public event, which is what we're going to talk about today. The expos.
Excellent segue.
Thank you, Tiny Disaster. I only felt like that was like 30% facetious from you. I really felt like that. But I mean, someone had to do it, Bumpy. Someone had to build this rickety bridge. So today we're going to talk about conventions, expos, things like Penny Arcade Expo, other shows I've personally been to. I've been to shows like Minecon, which was a thing back in the not it doesn't feel like it should be back in the day, but it is about 10 years ago now, which was Minecraft's convention at its at its zenith or height. Which is a very interesting thing. Obviously, a hellscape for Bumpy to peer into. We have Denver Comic Con, San Diego Comic Con, and some other various Comic Cons. This was at the sort of middle of the 2010s, where obviously a few years before the pandemic got in, and then there's other ones that are international that I've been to the UK before for a couple of events. I've wanted to do Tokyo Game Show. I've wanted to do what's the one in Cologne, Germany? Just Gamescom, I believe it's what it's called. Gamescom supposedly the biggest one in the world in terms of population, which is kind of maybe why I haven't gone there to some degree. At most of these events, you'll see tens of thousands of people. At PAX, you get a height of maybe 80,000, maybe 90,000 people. At Cologne at Gamescom, it's like 290,000 people at this event. So it's a different kind of number, and it would be a different kind of thing.
Bonkers. So, even 80,000 to me is like,
And it's never. I don't think it would ever be 80,000 at the same time. Obviously, a 4-day event tallies those numbers across a period of days as opposed to all at the same time. But I've been to the conventions and even the same conventions that can be just, completely dead at times, especially for the indie sections, so to speak. And I've been at events or public events that are expos and conventions where you can't even move barely. Like it's the alleyways are so filled with people kind of filing through, and you are both chained to your 10 by 10 foot space, but also thankful that you have some sort of refuge to stand like sort of away from, just the throng, the endless amount of people. And even then, when it gets that busy, they're going to start spilling over into your space in sort of unfortunate, uncomfortable ways. And that's really what we're here to talk about today, is sort of like do like a kind of a, I have some stories. I have some best practices to talk about with y'all, both with Bumpy, a Tiny Disaster, and anybody in chat that wants to participate here. Would really welcome questions. Maybe do like a not even like a specific section of question and answers, but throughout the, today we can have y'all just pipe in with questions or pipe up with questions when y'all have them. And otherwise, I'll try to carry it. My voice is sort of, I'd say 70% right now. So I do welcome the questions and the interjections and interludes and things of that sort.
All right. I did a quick 2019
yes.
search. GDC Games Developer Conference or Con or whatever. It was about 30,000 people, which of course is going to be the low end.
Right, because they actually don't have consumers at that one. It's only developers, right? Yeah, that's
PAX
right. Yep.
East, West, and San Diego Comic-Con were all around 125 to 135,000, with Gamescom being at 370,000.
So those numbers have gone up since I last kind of had them in my head, so to speak, right? Like that sounds like they've seen the proper inflation.
Yeah, that was the last year before
COVID hit, right? Yep. And we were actually at PAX East in April, or was it? No, it was in February. Basically a week or two before the entire country more or less shut down. And that was weird to be at, by the way, because everybody kind of knew what was going on, right? Like it was like, oh, there's something going on right now, this big virus, and we were all kind of questioning, whether or not we should be there. And that was a really weird situation. And so that's it. I mean, we could probably spend a whole hour talking about how these shows have been inhibited, hindered, etc. by COVID, by the pandemic. And we could even talk about how some of them have rallied and made themselves, still a viable kind of situation, even if it's a virtual kind of exhibit or a online effort as opposed to a public show. That could be, we could honestly spend a lot of time talking about that.
Well, that was something I was thinking about a little bit during our last chat. I don't remember what brought it. This year, seeing a lot of events that had been available, at least somewhat virtually, over the last couple of years, not offer that anymore, has been a bit of a bummer for those of us who don't live close to cities or don't want to go to giant events, and especially like learning type events like GDC kind of things, where they have lectures and stuff that could just be seen online that I'd be happy to pay for if I don't have to go to. But a lot of shows have just kind of turned off that option because it is more work. And
yeah, on a personal note, I 100% agree with that. I feel like they are having a missed opportunity when you establish a virtual show, when you have obviously like Steam support, things like that. Steam willing to front page your event, that kind of thing, and you pass on it for whatever reason because of maybe ultimately you want to offer more of an exclusionary event, I suppose, or like, not exclusionary. They see it as exclusive as opposed to exclusionary, but that's ultimately the same thing, right? Like, and
a book event I used to go to all the time, their big thing was, I think they do still offer some online options, but there's nothing online that can make up for the networking you can do in person. Sure. But the thought is kind of, but I'm not going to go in person, so it's not a zero-sum game. I'd like some benefits.
100%, and I feel like there are options like the GDC Vault, I think, that you could pay for and get access to at least older talks, which obviously, like, I don't know how new versus old you get. Obviously, you'd like to get the newer talks as well because some of the outdated talks are outdated. Some of them are evergreen, like you could watch a talk from 10 years ago and it would still stand up today, but that's not going to be the case for everything, not by a long shot. So It is surprising that GDC doesn't lean into maybe streaming some of their stuff, like even just like a partial stuff. I understand, like, wanting to say some of this stuff is for the people that attend first and foremost. Some of this stuff is maybe something that, we know, like, I know this is weird, but a comparison, but like, look at like UFC, they have pay-per-view events, but that's not all they have. They have 3 out of their 4 events a month be like easily accessed, if you have just a regular subscription to whatever ESPN or cable television. And so what they're doing there is they're offering a lot of their product, for at the basic level. And then they're saying some of this is actually, some of the top tier stuff we're going to put behind a little extra paywall or you got to be here, that kind of stuff. I'm surprised more events don't take on that kind of approach as well, to say, hey, we still can share a lot of this, like you said, not a zero-sum game, a lot to show the world, not just the people that are able to get here. And you think that would help grow their brand. And yet people, I think organizations, I shouldn't say people, but people at the top of organizations seem, some of them like GDC, seem very reticent to try this or to invest in this. The virtual stuff to some people felt like desperation, right? Like they didn't have any other option, and so the virtual option was to them, okay, we'll do this, but they never wanted to in the first place. And then other shows I feel like really embraced the opportunity for the virtual situation, and those ones are still now, having virtual events. Like just to name a few, Tokyo Game Show is still having a virtual event in addition to having a public event this year. And I'm pretty sure Penny Arcade Expo is doing that as well. And I think that is wise. Even just, not even thinking about it as a consumer, exhibitor, or media content creator, just thinking about it as an organizer from their business standpoint. It makes a lot of sense, I think, to continue to have that, virtual support, that virtual kind of exposure on top of what you already have at the show. It's getting to be where if you keep going the way of like only the people that can come into this room or this warehouse or whatever can see this, eventually no one's going to care anymore. You know what I mean?
It'll be interesting to see other new things kind of adapt and pop up as a response to the pandemic. Like, I'm looking at the numbers for the last 2 Wholesome Directs. Both got over 100,000 views.
Right.
For those games, that's going to have been a better opportunity to showcase themselves than maybe getting a few hundred people walking by a booth. So it's been interesting to see how the industry as a whole has adapted.
That's a great point, and it's a great thing to think about how you have to really understand how to extract value from these events. But if you go to public events, to get the most out of them. In the early days, and I would probably put myself among some of the transgressors of this situation. You didn't just go to public events because you knew how to extract value, knew how to build pre-release metrics or whatever. No, you went to public events because you knew you would see other notable developers that you could network with, possibly get in with them. We were younger than early 20s, so we were just trying to have a good time in big cities. You know what I mean? Like, oh, a chance to go here, a chance to go there. Of course, yeah. Like, I know we're all different in that regard about how we feel about what's fun in our life and stuff like that. But my age at that time, the person I was in my life, it was like, oh, I get a chance to, go to Boston. I get a chance to go to Austin, Texas. I get a chance to go to Denver. I get a chance to go to Seattle, which I always get a chance to go to Seattle, but this is on business multiple times now. And that's really interesting, LA, et cetera, San Diego. So, you had to at first, like, kind of just say, what's the justification for doing these things? Like, what's the value and stuff? And then when you get there, you go through it, you think you're doing everything right, but ultimately, if you don't have like really clear, concise, and very tangible call to action set up, you're not going to get the value that you want out of it, and you're going to sort of sink, probably thousands of dollars on this, potentially tens of thousands, depending on the event and where it's located and the team and the booth and all that kind of stuff, all that kind of stuff that we could get into on a deeper level. Again, today, maybe not, but like other things that we could get into, and like the logistics of like your checklist of things that you have to pay for so to speak, your budget, all that kind of stuff. You really want to make sure that's something that some of us learned by experience and the hard way, so to speak, over the years. That hey, this isn't really providing us much value when we just go to them and have people play our games and think that that's great and that's fine, stuff like that. Like we're missing little optimizations. We're missing a trick or two here, and that's where the call to actions come in, right? So an example of this would be your demo should have the opportunity to wishlist this game on Steam or sign up for your developer newsletter, et cetera, somewhere at the beginning and possibly at the end, if possible, kind of your demo, so that the 500 plus people that are sitting in the seats have that opportunity to say, yeah, I'll sign up for this. Then all of a sudden you have this retained thing, like a newsletter sign up or a wish list that is a pre-release metric that you're trying to build up. Just having, iPads or even just papers, a pad of paper and a pen that, is sign up for our newsletter, etc., is better than nothing. And that's what we did kind of back in the day before we had all of these obvious pre-release metrics that we've talked about so much that we're going for all the time, like the wish list and such. But now it's like, no, build this into the demo, make this streamlined. If you don't have good internet access on a show, which a lot of times is an issue, then have a demo that collects that information on the computer. That's very easy to do that if you have a good programmer, developer, et cetera, designer of games, to have that sort of just store that data, and then you can upload it later. And of course, they can't wish list, but like a newsletter situation, that's what we've done in the past. So I'm losing my voice a little bit, so I'm going to take a 1 minute and take some drinks. But reactions, thoughts, questions, concerns, diatribes. Go ahead.
How many diatribes do you know? I'm kidding.
Diatribes.
I was fortunate while the world was shutting down. Ubisoft started doing their Ubisoft Forward events, and I think they did 2 or 3 throughout the last few years. It's been almost a year since the last one, but that was strangely something I actually got to be a part of and attend. And not only did they have the actual event go live where they announced the various different games and stuff like that, but they got content creators to play some of their biggest games, and you connected to like their servers and everything, and then they recorded the footage and sent it to you, and then you were able to chop it up and make your videos, which was of the thing that you did while you were playing, which was it was a pretty interesting thing. And it was neat to see them actually, have content creators be able to do that. And then once the Forward event was done, they're like, hey, everything's done. And now you're able to release, everything out into the world. So people are like, oh, that game looked awesome. They start looking it up, and there's already videos there immediately following the event. So I thought that was a pretty cool thing. And I definitely, when they gave like exit interview type situations or surveys or what have you. Mm-hmm. And I said, these are great. Whether I get invited back or not, you definitely should do this, because I know there's a lot of content creators out there that are all across the country, all across the world, who cannot attend shows live, either financially or just logistically. It's too much. So I'm hoping that continues. It was a really cool thing, but we'll see where it goes in the future.
Ultimately, it points to that why not harness the power of the internet? It's surprising that some don't. It feels like that is in favor of the people exhibiting, so to speak, 100 times out of 100. And so if an organization says we're not going to do this, that almost seems like it's like in conflict with the very exhibitors that they want to come to their show and show their products. So it is I know we've circled back to this point a few times. It is kind of weird that post the heavy part of this pandemic, so to speak, at least, that we're still having shows that are coming out of it being like, yeah, those virtual events were one-offs, just trying to get us between, and to some extent, I guess I understand the backseating of them, but to eliminate them entirely seems really weird. I wouldn't get rid of them entirely if I was an organizer and I had already worked out some really probably awesome results from some of these virtual shows, especially if you take into account the getting some of those platform partners involved, like Steam, like I mentioned before. So, what else should we ramble or roll on? Let's see.
Well, Tiny Disaster had a question. She was going to ask you at the beginning. You sort of started to kind of list some stuff, but do you want to ask the question?
Bring it back up again. I forgot what the question was.
You mean the which shows he'd been to kind of thing?
Yeah, he just started naming some of the bigger shows, but let's see your street cred, man. Where all have you been?
It's mostly Penny Arcade Expos in Seattle and Boston are like the main squeeze, because those are the ones that are US based, affordable-ish in terms of how big they are. As big in terms of you do too small of an exhibit or a show, which I've seen that side. You're not going to get a whole lot out of those things if you don't have thousands upon thousands of people kind of hitting the floor, so to speak. So those the PAX ones are the big ones. Like I've said, I've done a couple of Comic Cons. Like San Diego Comic Con is the the mothership, so to speak, one. But then over the last, basically from like 2010 to 2018, 19, all of a sudden, Comic-Con wasn't a trademark, apparently, because all these different organizations started popping up in all these different cities with city name Comic-Con. Yeah. Or in like Emerald City, Comic-Con is Seattle. Portland had a Comic-Con that we attended. Denver had one. And so it's weird to describe them because they're not the same shows depending on where you go. Yes, they're all called Comic-Cons, but they're not organized by the same individuals. So some of them can be very awesome. Some of them can be very sparse and underwhelming, and they didn't do a good job of getting things ready to go. Obviously it takes some work to get people to show up, right? Like, you're not just going to go, oh, we're going to have this thing and thousands of people will just walk through the door. But it was clear in the early 2010s that organizers were kind of understanding that there was an audience out there that was starving for these kind of things, that were like, I can't get to Seattle, I can't get to Boston, but I want to go to a show like this. I can't get to San Diego Comic-Con, but I want to go to a Disneyland for nerds. You know what I mean? Like, I want to have a day or 3 days pass where I can just go and embrace nerd culture, Pokemon, on beanbags. That's a common thing at PAX, right? Like, everybody brings out their 3DS or obviously Switch at this point, but back in the day it was going back all the way to whenever the connecting stuff started happening with the Nintendo systems, like you could connect with other players or kind of ping them, etc., with their weird sort of systems like Nintendo had. All of a sudden, PAX started building out this whole side area for people that wanted to trade or battle Pokemon, just this whole areas with beanbags. And now that's like a staple of PAX. And when you go through it, it says, do not drop your butt on the beanbags. You will blow them up, because this has happened so many times by people, apparently. So it's just a funny side thing that comes out of these shows and stuff. Other UK shows, I don't want to forget the names of them. It's been a really long time. UK game shows. There was one in Bath. Bath was fun. Bath, UK. Game, not UK game shows, as in Wheel of Fortune. Dang it, Google, you knew better.
Game conventions is what you want.
Developer.
Bath must be the cleanest place in the UK. Or I saw a joke which was kind of weird and disturbing. It's not great, but somebody said, "Is used bath water just human broth?" That's right. Funny.
No, Bath turned out to be a very expensive place comparably to everywhere else. I found out in where I was staying. I was in Nottingham originally. Some of these events might still not be going on anymore, so that does hurt my cred to some degree and stuff. But we were just going out to whoever said, hey, we actually accept indie games. You don't have to have some sort of in with a publisher. You can go to these things, you can show at them. Sometimes they'd be like, we have a house for you to stay at or a couch for you to sleep on. If you're in a situation like a lot of us were back then, where it was just like, our studios couldn't necessarily afford every aspect of the budget in terms of getting us there, but we still wanted to go. And we were, again, younger, eager, just try to go out there. I actually was doing this on the media side before I was even doing it on the development side. So getting the media side, it was like you just wanted to be there because you were like, oh, I get a chance to see these games that I can talk about on the internet that maybe not everybody else will get access to right away. So there's some like exclusivity there, and yeah, that helps to some degree. It would have helped more, I think, if I had a YouTube channel back in those days. But just doing the standard media, like depending on the websites and the platforms you were writing for half the time. And half the time I was writing for platforms that we basically started from the ground up, like Indie Game Magazine, which was originally DIY Gamer, back in like 2012 time. So anyway, yeah, I have been to probably about 25 total shows, and about maybe 16 of those have been either PAX West or PAX East, because I've been to like 10 PAX Wests and like 4 PAX Easts. That is the shows. Those are the shows that I know the most. That commonly when I go to those shows, I know what I can expect, what to get out of them, who's going to be there. I've been to GDC as well, I guess, but that's just not a public expo / convention. It is a conference, so to speak. I don't know. It's just not. You just can't go there unless you're a Steam developer, which takes nothing to get. By the way, so you could easily go from the consumer to the developer side to do GDC if you wanted to do it. GDC would love this. They love nothing more than you wanting to be a developer and then giving them thousands of dollars to attend their conference. So that's a big thing for them. So I'm not trying to trash them too much, but they have shown little other than that as their interest most of the time, as far as their conference goes. So yeah, I mean,
you are farther along career-wise. How would you kind of look at cost versus reward when deciding what shows to go to?
Yeah, I mean, really, it's such a balance, right? Because the budget will often be like, you have enough for X amount of people, often 1 or 2, and that's really not enough to run a 4-day show 10 by 10 without really risking damaging your people, so to speak. It is I don't think anybody knows until they go through it. But if you've done a full day of like hard manual labor, or maybe a full day of like, I don't know, weren't you a package delivery guy at one point, Bumpy? Like a full day of that would be a good example of how that feels at the end. It also, like a full day of package delivery, and you're conversating with people a lot. You almost don't even realize by the end how exhausted, potentially dehydrated you might be at that point. A lot of stuff like that. When you're younger, in your 20s, I think especially, you don't really red flag or pay attention to those red flags as much as you go through them. Like at 37, I'm such a stickler now for when we do our shows. Sorry, one second. So when we do our shows, I'm such a stickler for making sure we have enough people to take this on, that we have a good rotation, that kind of thing. So if you're going to have a team that is the right number of people, you have to think about how that's going to affect the budget. Obviously, travel is a big thing there. If your show is not local or regional to your team, then one way to go about it would be like seeking out volunteers locally to help you. I've seen that work wonders in the past, as long as you give them good benefits, pay, obviously have them getting a badge that allows them to experience the convention when they're not working, which shouldn't be the whole time. I'm going a little blurry here, so one sec. It's really like about what you can mitigate. If you can't mitigate it, you're going to be spending lots and lots and lots of money, like or rather a significant amount of your earnings. If you make enough money and the money is coming in consistently, Vertigo Gaming Inc. is a great example of this. You can make these you can spend this money sometimes. You can invest, so to speak, and make these costs. It's a little bit of a cost sink to some degree. But you better be sure you're getting those calls to actions, the call to actions set up, because that's really the only tangible way you can know you gained value out of something, right? Before there was the sign up for our newsletter, before there was the here's how you wishlist our game on Steam right here and now, we had hopes and wishes and fingers crossed that the thousands of people that walked by our banners saw them, that interacted with them, saw the big TVs that were showing the demos. That's something that we always do if we can, have TVs on, higher up that are showing off things, because we're not going to, like you pointed out, Tiny Disaster, we're not going to get more than a very tiny percentage of these of the people that attend these shows to actually sit down and play this game. So what are like lighter levels of exposure that still can be meaningful, right? People wandering by the booth saying, I'm not necessarily going to interact, but they're, go play the game because I'm in a hurry or because I'm just in my own world. I'm not going to stop here. But I'm visually seeing the banners. I'm visually seeing the trailer or the gameplay. And there's like buttons, paper materials, cards. Those are good things to retain as well, right? But who knows if they're going to put it in their bag and get home and throw that all away. Who knows if they throw it away on the trash can 4 feet past you, as you hand it out. You try to make sure that you're not just handing them out like blindly without making sure that there's interest first, because that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It's just flushing your materials down the toilet a lot of times. But yeah, there's a lot of that going on. And to me, to answer your original question, you just got to feel it out in terms of this cannot cost us. This cannot risk our company. This cannot put us in a hole as a company that suddenly we're like, why did we go to this event? Like, we just dumped $12,000 into it, and we need that money. Like, because you're not just going to see it right away. It's not just going to come swinging back. It potentially can, but that's like kind of like a edge case. Most of the time, you're not going to see the money just come back right away. You're doing it for, Bumpy said, to some degree, street cred. But by God, that better not be the only reason you're there nowadays. Because if so, you're wasting your money. You need to be building up other things as well. Obviously, connections. Sorry, if you're at PAX East multiple times, multiple years in a row, then all of a sudden you start establishing relationships with people that come to the show a lot, right? Oh, you guys are back. You'll have that interaction across years of time, because a lot of these people are locals that just keep coming to the show year after year after year. So those relationships can be really helpful as well.
So it sounds like
oh,
go ahead.
Go ahead. No, you go.
It sounds like the risk is just super high and the reward is very minimal. It doesn't seem like it's really worth it for indie developers to go to these things.
I don't know, man. And yet they're I feel like that your sentiment is more felt now than it's ever been before, where the people would just rush to them, give them money, exhibit, and the organizers felt no real reason to add any additional value right to the situation, because they were like, well, the developers want to be here, they need it, they need us to show their games off. But over time, exhibitors have sort of put metrics to this, right? And said, whoa, you're not giving me a whole lot of value here. I have to work for my value myself. And that's sort of the given, right? Is that in the current state of this, you get a stage and people, and that's something, certainly, that's better than nothing. But that doesn't mean you're just going to have a bunch of people buy your game, wishlist it, etc. And one good thing that can come out of this, Bumpy, that you don't get in a lot of situations, is that you can kind of do some psychological, some very light psychological analysis with people who are playing your demo. If you see that they're struggling with certain things, right? If you see that they're getting hung up on certain things, that can be really helpful from the design standpoint to go, if your game, you think your game is in a state where everybody's just going to have fun and play it, it's going to be a great time. And there is a hidden side of this where you have to be careful, because a lot of people, even whether they like or don't like your game, they're like, I'm face to face with you. Your game is great. You're like, okay, like you got to be really careful with that. It's about watching them when they actually play. What are they struggling with? Like, what are the hangups, that kind of stuff. That can actually help. But you'd like to believe that the second or third time around you're doing this with the same game, you have all that stuff kind of ironed out, and now it's more about, oh my gosh, these people are having really enjoyable times, and now they're willing to sign up because they're delighted by this for either a wish list or for the developer newsletter, or they're going to join our Discord. Now, I mean, over the last 5 years, Discord, of course, is about as valuable as a newsletter sign up. So, seemingly, one nice thing that you'll see on the micro level, Bumpy, is that those 500 people that make it into your seat, a lot of them will follow up. Not everybody, but some of them will start to join your community, right? And start to build up. So if you're having trouble kickstarting your community, that is one way to go about it. But again, it's a lot of cost stuff going on. So how can you mitigate cost? There are indie areas that are usually fairly cheap comparably to regular, like, kind of areas and spaces. And those indie areas used to be like, put them in the broom closet. Now it's more like, hey, people like indie games. They'll give them a nice space where they know, hey, we're not going to just get buried here and nobody's going to ever see us. We're going to be in, some place that actually has foot traffic. But so, like, other things I'm trying to think of, like, mitigating costs, but it's like, if you're going to fly people, multiple people, if you're going to get hotels for multiple people, yeah, I mean, the cost value there is that you see that as an opportunity, just like Steam Next Fest, is that it's going to be a marketing bump, but this one's going to cost you, right? Like, this one's going to cost you in a way that's different than the ones that are, like, kind of not, that you don't have to go anywhere to do. And so that is where these public events now find themselves, is rubbing against virtual events who have proven their value, right? Without a whole lot of cost investment. If it is a cost investment, it's a low cost submission fee or something like that. It's not like thousands of dollars. And so these events are going, well, we're the cool place to be, right? And you're going, I don't know, man, coming out of the pandemic, a lot of people aren't really into it anymore and are less about crowds, right? Are less about waiting in line 2 hours to try Dying Light 3 or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, are less inclined to do those kind of things. There will always be, like, as the world turns, as adolescents turn into teenagers turn into adults, like, there's always going to be a new crop of individuals that are willing to just die hard for different things and such. But it doesn't seem like it's a fad at the moment. It doesn't seem like it's this big thing that everybody is just diving into and wants to do.
See, like, how event numbers look this summer, and just, it's like, in a way it feels post-pandemic, but also I'm pretty sure the States had 5 times the number of COVID cases this Memorial weekend compared to last Memorial weekend. So I'm sure there's still a lot of people that are all like, maybe it's not over enough for me to go to somewhere that'll be jam-packed with people.
But the way it's going, will it ever be, is my kind of thought. You know what I mean? Like, it's going to be, if it is, it's going to be very, to me, gradually transitional. And that there's never just going to be a point where everybody, or like the majority of people are suddenly going to be like, it's completely okay now. Maybe if there's just the
that's why I'm curious to see the numbers.
The world or national government ordinance comes in and says, like, this is okay now and stuff, and everybody goes, oh, okay, it's okay now. That's the only way I could see, like, a big sweeping percentage of people. But I feel like everybody's already doing that, even through all of this. They're already like, it's already okay, even though you pointed out there are, cases are up and stuff like that. So you have this big majority of people already, at least in our country, or at least in my country, in the U.S., that aren't really inhibited by the current situation and stuff, and want the shows to be back open and want to be back at the shows and stuff. And yet I feel like there's a much bigger percentage now of people that are at least willing to speak up where they weren't before, where they're like, pass. I'm not really interested in it. And then, like, GDC was a great example of earlier this year of a show that was still going on, or the show that went on like it wasn't a pandemic when it was. And you have all these people on Twitter, again, like my hand raised as one of the transgressors because my boss asked me to go out with him to do it. And you go out there and you're all nervous about it because you're like, this is not probably the right time to do this. You get there, everything's seemingly fine. Oh, they're checking our medical history, on the COVID tests and all that kind of stuff, our COVID cards. Everybody else has got them. Like, this is great. We're all great. And then everybody gets COVID. And I didn't, but a lot of people did. Like, and this, you watched a week of Twitter correspond where this beginning, middle, and end story happened. And everybody looking out on the outside in was like, this looks like cuckoo crazy town, like just insane people. And I was one of them, you know what I mean? So it's still going on. There's still a lot of people out there that I think look at it and say that this is like, I'm personally not going to put myself out there and go to a show, that kind of stuff. I'm not saying that about myself, but I feel like there's a lot of people that are saying that still. And so it'll be interesting. And like Bumpy said, there's virtual events that really hit the spot, that do the job, so to speak. And so it's just really about the individual organizations and how they proceed forward from here, I think, because some of them are going to get the memo. Others are going to continue to try to hold on. These organizations are similar to like big AAA developers and publishers that already have such a share of the situation that they don't even see they're losing, right? Because they're making so much money still. So they might be losing out and they may not realize it until it's too late, kind of thing. So that's definitely, it's a possibility.
So we've got about 15 minutes left, and the whole reason this chat cropped up is because you had stories from about going to shows for the lessons learned chat that we didn't have time for. So before we run out of time, how about some of those stories?
Sure. I mean, they're really self-indulgent and personal, so it's cool that we only have a little bit of time for them and we didn't make it the whole episode or anything like that. I'm very cool with that. Like Minecon was just a very formative show for me because I was very young. We had the game after AI War to show for Arcen Games. This was basically the sophomore release of Arcen Games after a really amazing, debut. Helped by the fact that we were like I think 130th game on Steam or something like that. So this was a very different time, right? Like very different era. And we apply. They're having this indie section at Minecraft. Oh wow, a developer that is basically an organization, like a convention that's basically run by an indie developer, as sort of a we're going to do this our way sort of thing and stuff, like as opposed to the other conferences we went to, which we had our gripes about and stuff. So obviously I wasn't part of that Minecraft group that was, the developer group that was talking about this. But once we heard that they were going to do it and that they were going to offer an indie space for other indie games, or like a space for other indies that they would choose. So we submitted, we got selected, which was an amazing feeling because there's only like 8 other developers we were with, or 7 other developers we were with, and all of them I was just like in awe of their games. Frozen Synapse by Mode 7 Games, Retro City Rampage, and some other names that you may have known back in those days, if it doesn't hold true to today. But there were some really cool developers that I met there doing that. I talked about how, I think on the last one, how Minecon showed me that Minecraft was an engine for like hundreds of companies that had nothing to do with the actual development of Minecraft. A lot of merch companies, a lot of content creators, a lot of various different outfitters, organizations, third parties that were riding this wave at the time. And it was like kind of insane because it was like, I don't even know anything about this game and I don't understand why so many people are obsessed with it. But like we were in Vegas at a gigantic convention center because of this indie game, like basically that had popped so big. So that was pretty insane. Funny things from Vegas, being at a convention in Vegas, which I think the DICE convention is a convention that takes place in or conference. It takes place in Vegas, but that's like another GDC type. But I've never been to DICE. I can tell you that having a conference in Vegas has its pros and cons, and depending on who you are, you could see those as pros or you could see those as cons. The one of the UK, I can't name names because it's just not right, but a section of the devs there were like UK devs, and they wanted to go out and because they'd never been to Vegas before this event, so they wanted to go out and see what Vegas was about because obviously they'd only heard about it from the perspective of someone from a completely different country. So we went out, and one of the indie devs that was particularly doing well with their indie games apparently was really wanting to gamble and started doing that, and apparently did that a lot to the point where their credit card company had canceled their card or stopped their card, and they had to call inebriated and let the credit card company know, I would like to spend more of my money here. And we basically were able to get him to stop doing that because I think he was like $12,000 like down or something like that. So that was like, that went from like a, hey, we're having a good time to, he had set a number suddenly and he was laughing. And I think even to this day, this developer probably didn't care or missed that money, but I'm like, man, I would have hated that. So that was one thing that I was like, wow, I didn't know any developers could be like that. Like it was like a naive thing back in the day when you're like, well, all indie developers behave like A, B, C. And that was something where I was like, whoa, that was something that I did not expect. As a young, I was like 21 or 22 at the time when this was going on. So I was like, okay, cool. Then later on, after that, it felt like kind of like not ugly, but just like that was weird. And then there was a time where they wanted to go into a dance club, like a club, but they apparently knew somebody, and so we were going to cut in front of like a bunch of people. And I don't like doing that at all. Like that felt really bad to me. I'm like, I could feel hundreds of eyes on me, being like, "F you, buddy." Like I'm like, I don't want to do this. So those kind of things at a young age, you go out with these people and you just kind of get swept into it. But there was a nice story too. We were walking through a part of this sort of upstairs, different kind of mall area with different outlets, and one of the outlets was like this Irish pub type thing, and unbeknownst at the time, this just really big guy was like, hey, are you guys with Minecon, and come on in and stuff like that. And we found out that it turned out to be the composer for Binding of Isaac, Super Meat Boy, this guy named Danny B, who's like larger than life, both in like online presence and in real life. He's an incredible person. He's huge, big dude. And he didn't know us barely at all. And he had no reason or had no, like, he didn't have to do what he did essentially, which was essentially call us over, say, hey, aren't you guys showing your games, blah, blah, blah. Why don't you come over and hang out here? This is my girlfriend. This is my sister. And we just hung out for like hours. And like, that was like such a formative moment for me because there's so much anxiety when you go to these events. There's so much anxiety in general when you're trying to push into a new career path and you don't really know anybody. And so like, like I just wanted to shout out Danny B because like that guy's, I don't know what he's up to now. He makes amazing music if you're into that kind of chiptunes and that kind of stuff. But he's just was a hell of a guy and gave me an opportunity to just sort of get comfortable, talking with other developers, other successful. I wasn't a successful developer at the time, but I wanted to be, and I wanted to learn from these people. And yeah, that was pretty cool. The other time that I wasn't really starstruck then, but looking back on it, that was awesome. And then another time in the UK, at one of those events that I told you I couldn't remember any of the names of, I'm at a dinner and everybody's kind of introducing themselves. And by the end of it, I realize I'm surrounded by the team that made 007 Bond for Nintendo 64, which I played like religiously when I was 10. So that was crazy. That was just crazy to talk to people about that. And so those are like cool moments that can kind of come up, especially if you're on the way up, so to speak. Because you'll run into some people that even in their current state, they've already just been through so much and they've already have such huge experience. And you're like, oh, you're like just an indie developer now because the things you did before were working on this massive big project. And they're like, yeah, it was great being a cog in a machine for a while, but eventually, these people are brilliant and it makes sense for them to go out and make their own games and stuff. So just little like naive things you learn along the ways when you're younger. That's what I kind of took from those events. That like, hey, if you go by yourself, you might be really lonely at times, and you better anticipate like that sort of that homesickness or that hit that, oh, I'm on the road for a week. Maybe I didn't have a bunch of people that I came in with. Maybe I didn't have a bunch of established relationships already from past events. And it can feel really lonely. It can feel like you're like just standing there like the only person on earth despite being surrounded by thousands of people. So I definitely had moments like that before. I know that I've had side gigs before where I told my side gig, hey, I'm going to do this event, and so I'm not going to be available. And then the side gig is like, you still need to do this. And I'm in like a hotel room at like midnight, and I'm exhausted from 9 hours of floor work, and I have to do additional work on my computer, and I want to cry and break down. Like those kind of things, like those are like the early days where I'm like, okay, have a better plan, have a better setup, or if you can, have a better side gig than I did at the time. The boss I had for that side gig was not conducive to me having a good experience at my events, and eventually I did leave that side gig because I was like, I'm sick of the treatment. You have that conversation with somebody ahead of time, and then they don't really give you the credence for it. That's pretty rough. So, but like other than that, I mean, one of the reasons I love going is great dinners. Like, if you can, especially on your company's own dime. But again, this is all luxury and indulgent and stuff, and you have to make sure that you actually have like the funds to do this in the first place. Otherwise, it doesn't make any sense at all. As Bumpy said, a lot of times it makes it only makes sense if you can put a combination of things together, like you think you can achieve your expectations for the call to actions, and you like being there, and you like doing it, things like of that sort. Then you can kind of piece together why you would go to a major event, maybe spend, a decent chunk of your marketing budget on it. I would say that it's a thing where getting into that, like, I wouldn't just throw away your marketing budget for it. If you had a marketing budget and you have exhausted some of your other areas that you think that you should be putting your money into, and you still have a chunk left, then that's probably where I would personally see that as an opportunity to use that money for like a public event or something like that. But yeah, we've talked about this in the past, especially this last year or two. There are but there are a few other plays that you can make with your marketing budget nowadays that I feel would be of higher value. Unless you feel like you have like the show game, Bumpy. You know what I mean? Like a game that you feel like sells itself in a way that people don't even have to play it. Like people can just grab a flyer or sign up for it, that kind of thing. Because then you can get into like the thousands of investors, so to speak, or people that are going to connect and commit and stuff like that. Otherwise, you're very limited. It's going to be a few hundred people. Rupert mentioned Paradox's PDXCon. Kind of big but limited focus. Yeah, I mean, I think that those conferences are always going to have a place. The ones that are like for a genre specific, or a niche,
publisher or developer, like BlizzCon and so on and so forth.
Yeah, and Paradox is even more than just a developer, because I think that they're a genre, right? Well, I mean, but they mean like they're not out of they're strategy games. I don't even think you have a Paradox.
Exclusively.
Okay, I didn't know for sure. I knew that they were primarily.
I mean, they have city skylines, which, I mean, could maybe make the stretch that that's strategy. They have some RPG games and so on and so forth.
It diversifies their portfolio to have more games than just the one genre anyway when you're doing a show.
If you're looking strictly strategy, I'd say Slitherine might be the company that does all strategy.
I think id, the Doom developer, used to have one back in the day. I don't think they do that anymore. They retired it, but id Software, I think, had it. I think it was id, maybe somebody else, but that rings a bell. There's a lot, and it is, no matter what, it is a huge monetary investment on basically most sides. If you're the
with a developer or publisher conference, the only advantage they have versus going to these other big, this is PAX and so on and so forth. The company that's running PAX and so on, they're making the money, whereas at least they're recouping some of the money, and maybe they're making it off ticket sales if you're a publisher like Blizzard or whatever that's actually doing stuff. So,
yep, it's like the difference in cost of the place and all the setup and all that kind of stuff versus the, like you said, how much the tickets cost, and that's why they're often the prices that they are.
Yeah.
Is to say, okay, as long as we price them at this ticket level, if we hit this, conservative threshold of people coming to it, then the show will pay for itself at least.
Yeah. So basically, the takeaway that I'm getting from all this, and again, it could be completely off base here, is we need companies like, well, not necessarily PAX or GDC or anything, new companies that are not already established that are starting to make strides into digital expos, digital conventions, because there's no limit to the amount of tickets you can sell. You could even, I don't know, offer part of it for free with like advertisements run on like a Twitch channel or something. And there's a bunch of different ways to market that, and it's going to reach so many more people. And as a Tiny Disaster was mentioning with like Wholesome Direct, it's going to reach way more people than any physical convention or anything could, because people, either through circumstances, awkwardness, that's another thing that people can be like, I don't want to be around a bunch of people, or they just don't like people in general, or just convenience or laziness even. They don't want to go to these places. So that's probably the future. We just got to get the people to realize it.
I think I totally agree. I think that like the way the public shows can help themselves out is have more like liaisons for sections or portions of the show that are willing to like invest in, like, say, like if we had like an indie liaison or a liaison for the indie area that would be connected to the very tip top of the organization, that could say, hey, could we give extra value to these developers on site? Can we give them extra exposure for these developers to the consumers that are coming to see these shows on site? How can we get more out of the connection between the consumers and the 80 to 125,000, consumers? How can we give exhibitors kind of a better connection to them, since they actually did show up, which in theory could be more valuable than just a virtual view, right? Like it should be, you know what I mean? Like if you're doing it right, like if the organization is going about the right way. So we need organizations to kind of be willing to say, to drop that old guard of, we're just a cool happening thing and everybody was going to just come to us, and we don't need to go extra miles for our consumers or our exhibitors. We'll just give them what we've done in the past. If they keep doing that, then that to me is a ship sinking kind of situation.
The easiest
over time.
The easiest way I can see them wanting to run a physical show and have online attendance as well would be in person. You can only get certain swag, so to speak, certain gift things that you get to say, I've been here to this. It's not just a lanyard. You might actually have like stuff from various different developers all put into maybe a grab bag as part of the thing. That way they can boost attendance records, or not records, but attendance, and give people a reason to go there. So
that's a great point. That's something that we didn't really talk about, but as we're wrapping up, I'll mention is that swag bags is a thing that was happening really popularly in the early 2010s, where you'd get a gigantic bag that was as big as you, and you would go to every, exhibit or whatever, and they'd have free swag, right? Exactly. After a while, you realize how much just absolute crap you get out of that. Like worthless, advertised branding, but like, some things you're like, cool, I get, swag swag, was it tactical swag grabbing? You know, get some pins, get a nice new mouse pad, that kind of, you know, I understand. But grabbing every single thing, every single paper item, you know, or whatever, like every single pamphlet, that kind of thing. I don't think a lot of people enjoy that anymore, and I think a lot of that is because that the swag doesn't have a lot of value. So that's something that we like to do. We like to make, not like spend a bunch of money, but we'll press a lot of we'll work with a button presser, and we'll have a lot of those CSD, you know, logos on buttons, and people love those. You know what I mean? Like, it's so much more than what they normally would get from people, especially when you're giving them away. Are these free? Yeah, go ahead, take them. We have hundreds of them. We printed out a bunch of them, so that kind of thing. You try to get them to take a pamphlet or a card with the website on it, or the store page URL. But that's kind of the play there. Yeah, if you can't get them to hang around long enough to play the game, or they just don't feel like it, or there's a line, which will happen if you have any kind of interesting game, you'll probably form a line at these places. Then you want to still connect with a lot of the individuals that can only sort of stop by or pass by, so to speak.
Any final thoughts, Tiny Disaster?
It mostly just feels like both sides can learn a lot from each other, and I had hoped we would see more adaptation during the pandemic of like ways to interact online and ways to showcase and demo stuff and that kind of thing. But it's hard to build up new technologies even just in a couple of years.
100%. I feel like we're 10 years too early. If it would have happened 10 years later, there would be so much more VR tech that would be maybe not perfected, but would have been optimized further. AR would be more of a thing now, that maybe you could even put some of this stuff in your own house, your own room, that kind of stuff, and interact with. But we're not there yet. That's going to be in like the 2030s. So it'll be interesting to see how Bumpy mentioned the word stopgap before for a different reason, but this is kind of maybe where we're at with the virtual / public shows right now is we're in a stopgap between the technology being good enough, because I think it was one of the shows, I believe it was Gamescom, tried to do a virtual booth, like, or exhibit, right, that you would, or even convention hall that you would go to, and you could go to different booths, but it was so rudimentary and full of user experience errors, user interface issues, etc. So we'll see. I imagine in 5 to 10 years there will be more shows where people put on headsets and just, like, I mean, you more or less could do that in VR chat. If you guys know about VR chat or the metaverse, that kind of stuff, you more or less can do that right now. Like, people are building like 19 Kmart's from 1991 in VR chat, and like thousands of people are flocking to it, being like, "Oh yeah, remember the icy machine? Remember layaway?" You know, and so it's just it's like it is limitless, the virtual space, as far as like people walking around and interacting in it. Conventions are totally going to happen in that regard over the next 5 to 10 years, I think, as more and more people get easy access to VR hardware, etc.
Okay, well, I think that's gonna do it for this week. I actually have to go, but we're not gonna be here.
We're off
Well,
next
you
week.
guys might
Yep.
be here next week. I'm not gonna be here next week. My family's
No, we'll be off
visiting for the
next.
first time in 3 years. So
No, we're a power trio, so we'll be off next week and pick up the week after.
there we have it.
Do we have a particular subject for that one, or are we still meshing together the schedule?
Oh,
I think we've mapped it out, but I don't. Let's just say unclear, because I'm not sure.
I know. Let's just say follow us on social media to find out between now and then. How about that? How about that for a soft sell,
sure.
or a soft hard sell? I don't know.
I think we're bouncing between adapting during game development and project management. So somewhere in there, because kind of that was sort of evolved into this, and it kind of was
We've
part of the
dabbled.
lessons learned. So we're not sure. We might circle back to adapting game development. We'll see. All right. During game development, excuse me. All right. Well, that's going to do it. I must run. Hopefully everybody had a good time to hear tales from beyond the computer desk, I guess. I'm not sure. Going out and rubbing elbows with the other indie developers and the great unwashed masses. So take care, everybody. We'll see you guys in about 2 weeks' time.